Today is Monday, April 28th, 2025, and this is Spring Office Hours, Season 4, Episode 10, Docker and Test Containers with Edu Melendez. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate from Broadcom, joined by my good friend and colleague, DaShaun Carter. DaShaun, how's it going?
Dan, it's been too long. It feels like it's been forever since we've done an episode, and that makes me sad. So I'm really, really happy to be here. It is a great time to be a Spring and Java developer. The world it's amazing. And it's almost May. Like May is right around the corner. We're getting new stuff. My home lab is going great. I've had a lot of fun upgrading my home lab. I recently added a NVIDIA 5090, so I got all the cool new toys. And that's been so new, so awesome that I had to go and close the door because the fans are live and I have things too close and I was worried about the audio. But things are going great. And new toys are fun. A lot of fun. And we recently got a new toy that I like to call Spring AI Milestone 7. What's going on?
Oh my gosh, there's a blog post on it. We have not talked about it since we've been off the air a couple of weeks, but one of the big things in that blog post was that this is going to be the last milestone before a release candidate and then a GA before Spring AIO, which is May 19th or May 22nd, that week of. So that means we are getting a GA of Spring AI next month.
For those of you that those are the goosebumps in my arm. I get excited about these kind of things. Goosebumps. And it's so why awesome. I can't play poker, because the goosebumps just are like, oh, this is great. And it's right around the corner. It feels like
terrible at poker, huh?
Yeah, dude, I can't play poker. It's because the goosebumps, unless I'm wearing like scarves, sweaters, all the way, gloves all the way down. Like, yeah.
Big
I can't hide that. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. May is going to be an exciting month. Spring AI, Spring Boot 3.5, Spring IO, a couple other conferences coming up. I mean,
like any one of those in a given month is plenty.
Yeah.
But May has all of that crammed into one. Wow.
Yeah, you're heading to Miami to the Remix conference, right?
I'm not gonna lie. I'm looking forward to this conference like a lot. I've been practicing. It's the one that I have prepared for the most in my lifetime. It's not the one that I've done the most. I've got a couple others that I've done so many times, and with that comes a lot of reps. But this one, like for the big show, I have done more work for this presentation that I'm doing at Code Remix than ever before, and I'm excited about it. It's starting to feel like comfortable, and I'm still tweaking and fine-tuning because so many things are happening with our customers. There's so many great stories around what they're doing, and I'm excited to share it.
Yeah, our good friend Simon says Spring 7, Spring Boot 4 with JSpecify will be great. Yeah, so there are some release candidates on Spring Framework 7 out there, so you can get your hands on that now. We were just talking before the show about JSpecify and nullability in Spring Framework 7, and hopefully we'll have some news on a show about that coming up soon. So, but today's show is all about Docker and test containers with our good friend Edu. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. Actually, before we bring on Edu, I just want to remind everyone, if you are here in the live stream, please go ahead and get your questions in. We have a great guest today. Hopefully he's going to help answer some questions. We do this live stream usually every Monday, 1 to 2. If you're here, we hope you can get some questions in. If not, you can get to the replay on the Spring Developer YouTube channel. We also go ahead and turn this into a podcast so you can get this wherever you get your podcasts. Whew, that was a mouthful. And
that was a mouthful.
With that, I want to bring our good friend Edu to the stage, and here he is. Hello.
Hello.
We did.
Edu. All right, man, this is going to be fun. For those who don't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on these days?
Yeah, sure. I am Edu Meléndez. I am from Peru, actually, but live in Mexico. I like to clarify that because in the last year, people think that I am from Mexico, but I am happy living here. I am currently working at Docker as a software engineer. And, I joined Docker because of the Atomic Yard acquisition almost 1.5 years ago. And, currently working on test containers for Java. And of course, also contributing to the open source ecosystem to integrate more with Docker and test containers.
And open source contributor, a Java champion. You do it all, and we're happy to have you here. So I think a really good place to start is, we'll start with test containers. But even before test containers, You've done a lot of open source work. Did you, before you got involved with Atomic Jar, were you an open source contributor to Testcontainers before you got started with them?
Uh, to be honest, I only did one contribution to
That's more than
Testcontainers
I did.
before joining to Testcontainers, and I think that's how I also met uh, the maintainers at that time,
Awesome.
Sergey, yeah, and then Sergey invited me to the team years later.
That's awesome. Even just one contribution, DaShaun and I talk a lot. Like if you find these projects that you're really interested in, like contribute it back to them, like whether it's documentation or that one single contribution you made. You never know where it's gonna like kind of lead you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was an interesting one too, because it was not only contributing to Testcontainers, but also coordinated with the Google team. So they release a specific Docker image for the emulators they have on the CLI, on the SDK. And that enabled, well, they provide the image, and then, well, we just added the implementation on Testcontainers, and then we have a lot of happy users using the emulators to test locally.
Fantastic.
Awesome. So from a Testcontainers perspective, if somebody's never heard of Testcontainers, how would you kind of describe that to them?
Well, Testcontainers is an open source project. It's available in many languages nowadays, so you can pick up your favorite one. And it basically enables to manage the containers programmatically. So, I mean, the name is Testcontainers, and it was the way it began, right? People started using it in tests, starting databases, running the tests against the real database that it was provided via for Docker. But nowadays, and it's really cool to see how Spring Boot also provided for local development. So you have your configuration as using Testcontainers, and then you can use it for tests. You can use it to start the service locally as well.
Yeah, and I think it solved a real problem with testing, right? Which is like we kind of crafted these scenarios to write tests against some kind of like stand-in database or dummy database. And as DaShaun and I talk a lot about, like we want to be kind of shifting left, right? And if I'm using a Postgres database in production, I want to be using that in my local environment, whether it's dev or test. I don't want to be connecting to some like third-party database somewhere that's kind of set up, managed a certain way. Like I want to use the things that I'm using in production. And so Testcontainers really kind of helps me with that.
Yes, indeed. And it's even more it solves even more complicated setups. And well, maybe the one that I'm going to describe is not that complex, but I remember the first time I used it, it was because we had a lot of issues deploying to production because of database. At that time, we were using DB2. And there is special syntax on DB2 as well, because we were using procedures, if I remember correctly. And well, at that time, there was no DB2 module on Testcontainers, and they released it like 3 months later. So we adopted the module immediately, and then using Liquibase, we test all our scripts against the real database. So we just removed that issue from our backlog. It was really nice, yeah. And I think people, it's happy using Testcontainers with the Spring Boot and the other projects.
It's such a big difference, right? When I think Testcontainers, I go all the way back to like 2000. In 2000, I was working for a company, and it was the first time that I was building out a team. So I had to like be aware of like how many people, what skill sets they had, but also what was running on their desk. And at that time, it cost about $20,000 because we wanted, this is prior to containers existence, but we wanted all of our developers to be able to run at that time, the thick middleware. It was Netscape application server because we were doing EJBs, of course, and DB2. And we wanted them to be able to do that on their laptop or on their desktop. So there's also other software in there, the Rational Rose suite and all the things that we were doing back in 2000. But it was $20,000 to sit down at a desk. So to add somebody to the team, there's just an automatic $20,000 for the computer that they needed in order to run all these things. It was not cheap. So that scar tissue that's in my backlog, that scar tissue completely changed. With test containers, I can give these production similar environments, syntax similar platforms, whether it's a database or AI or anything else. I can build these things and I can have this consistency from the laptop all the way to production, and that's huge. There's still a massive need, and if you're not doing it, I encourage you to figure out a way how to do it, to have as similar as possible between what you're running on your laptop to production. That is still a must-have, and if you're not doing that today, I'm sorry. There's a better way.
And it's really come full circle with Atomic Jar being acquired by Docker, because in my development, I was using things like Docker Compose to spin up these same containers. And now, like, the getting started experience is really nice. If I download a repo, it has a Docker Compose in there and I can spin those up. But now I also have on the test side, like if I'm using some kind of Docker Compose or a Docker container there, like it's just a seamless integration. So both from a development standpoint, a testing standpoint, even moving to another like environment standpoint, everything's kind of come full circle. So it's really great to see.
Yeah, the history about this is pretty interesting because at that time, the most common way it was I don't know about you, but I was in a team in which we were sharing a database.
Yeah,
so right.
Those were always fun.
Exactly. So of course there were flaky tests because probably 2 or 3 members were running the same integration test against the very same databases.
Yep.
There were other issues because DBAs didn't want to grant permissions to the database as well. I remember having those issues too. And how Docker solved those issues when it was released, it blew my mind. And then it was Docker Compose. And then we can have those embedded containers, well, not the containers itself, but definitions inside our applications using test containers. So yeah, I think that
even with those shared databases, I've been in large organizations where you have to like submit a ticket to get those resources stood up. And hey, I need a dev database. Oh, you're going to wait 2 to 3 weeks for it. Like what? Like I want to kick off a project today, not 2 to 3 weeks from today. And so just like being able to kind of remove that constraint too was kind of game changer for me. So
huge, right? That you're bringing up all these other pain points. See, the thing is, there's still customers, there's still teams that are out there that like, oh yeah, I would like to use Postgres. Even though they could go and pull it down, they could use it freely locally and do their development. They've got to wait 2 to 3 weeks or longer to get one of those stood up for them. Oh, the pain. That doesn't make me happy. That makes me sad.
Yeah. A lot of, like you said, a lot of scar tissue. So cool. So yeah, the test containers, for a little bit of history with Spring, test containers has been there for a little while now, but I think even within Spring, it's gotten a lot easier, right? Some updates to test containers. You used to have to like do this little song and dance with like configuration to get everything to kind of connect. And now just a couple annotations and you're up and running, right? Like the getting started experience with Spring is fairly simple.
Yeah, and it has improved a lot since then. At the beginning, it was the dynamic property source annotation, and users, developers had to define which properties they had to override. And nowadays, it's just service connection annotation, and that's it. Basically, the Spring Boot already supports a lot of test containers implementations, Spring AI as well, and it works just out of the box. And I really like what is coming in the next version of Spring Boot, the 3.5. There is a new SSL annotation, and there is a specific container implementation that is using it right now. Is for Elasticsearch, because Elasticsearch comes with security enabled by default.
Yep.
So the annotation basically do the mapping between in order to get a secured connection with the container. So
cool. I wasn't aware of this, so I'm learning something new today.
Oh, great to share.
Yeah, the other thing is like the ecosystem of test containers has really expanded. And I was trying to see, I know Kafka recently changed, they have released a native image, a native compiled version, and that's also as a test container, right?
Yes, yes, indeed. We were working close with the Confluent team. They shared with us in advance about this Kafka native image, and at that time we already had the Apache Kafka container implementation that it was working with the Apache Kafka image. And then when we tested, it was just working. So
Yep.
we didn't change anything on test containers. We just added support for it. Like, okay, this is a valid image now, and yeah, it's very fast. So it's a GraalVM image compile. So yeah, very very fast.
Fantastic. And that's the other, like, that's the big thing. We before the show started, we were talking about native images and build packs and all these great things that we can do. The idea, even if I had a $20,000 laptop, there are systems that our audience is working on that they, given traditional circumstances, they would not be able to run all the things they need to run locally. But now that we've got these native images, now that we've got test containers, I can run 30 databases in one of these native images. I can run a bunch of databases. I can run Kafka native image, small things. And I can run all of my Spring Boot apps, have them scale to 0 and run on my laptop. And I can have these massive enterprise grade production ready systems running. The real cool thing here is the similarities that I notice. Test containers, like at the start, it was great, right? We had a lot of these cool things, and I started to lean into the things that were available in the test container ecosystem. So there was like, again, just for me, there was some real high value add. If you were, playing in the ecosystem, playing in Java Spring space, and you had a test container image, I was much more likely to grab it because I knew that it was going to be easier to set up. It was going to be easier to onboard other team members, and that's great. And I find that similarity in the size and the scope of the ecosystem, I find that to be really, really valuable. Also, that's why I lean into Spring Boot. The size of the Spring ecosystem, I find that it's easier to lean into something when there's a Spring Boot starter. So this combination that we got when we got to Spring Boot 3.1 really kind of exploded. It made so many more things easy to adopt, easy to get started, and easier to get to production because of the size of the ecosystem. It just
And Kafka container is another great example, I will say, about test containers because it hides a lot of configuration that users don't need to be aware of. They will just define the Kafka container, the image they want to use, and voila. It's a running container that you have, and you will use it for your test. Because, if we want to go into details about Kafka, you need to enable the advertise listener from the host, and that's really tricky. So test containers already provides the features in order to enable it. So that's pretty cool.
I wanna lean in on something you said earlier because it's not something I've used a lot. And you said test containers during dev. And I know DaShaun, I know you've kind of jumped into this, but I wanna understand this a little bit more because I haven't used it. So normally when I was like using containers from a dev perspective, I would use something like Docker Compose because I have this repo and I know if you're using Docker and you download this repo, you can run a Postgres container, you can run some type of event-driven application architecture, right? There are all these images that you can just kind of pull and start using right away. But then if I need to like start testing, I would use test containers. And if I wanted to test against probably a different database than my dev database, now I'm using test containers to like use a different image. And so we have this idea of test containers at dev time. What is that? Is that now just saying, hey, that test container that I've kind of defined as a test container is something I'm going to use at dev time as well? Maybe you can kind of clear that up for me.
Yeah, I know that the name maybe it's a little bit confused, right?
Just because, as you said, it started
as
as a test container, right? And now it's branched off and has the ability to do more.
Yeah, indeed. It was a really great feature that was added on Spring Boot 3.1, if I just 3.1. and indeed, there are a lot of test containers users, Docker Compose users as well, and some of them were requesting something like, okay, I am already using test containers, so I want to keep test containers for my local development as well, and I don't want to change configuration properties and have an additional setup, an additional profile. So, uh, well, now with Spring Boot, you can add a test application, right, on the test sources, and you will just need to define a new main method and point to the test containers configuration. So what I really like about this is that you can share your test containers configuration among the test and the development mode. Yeah, I think that's pretty nice. And even in the Spring Boot CLI, it was also added the Maven task, Spring Boot test run, and the test run for Gradle as well. So
That
So
was
if you
huge.
are,
That was huge.
so if
I
you are,
remember my mind getting blown with the test application and having it. I even thought, I struggled. Like, do I want to have the Docker
Yeah.
Compose? The Docker Compose file is
Right.
nice, easy to read. I can kind of see what's happening. But it all came back to this git clone run life. Like, I don't know who coined that, probably Josh. Is like, I just wanted to be able to come into a repository that somebody is working on. I want to be able to open up and get going. And that test application was huge in making that available. So I did. I struggled. Do I want to go down this route and
Yeah.
make everything a test container, or do I do a Docker Compose, or both?
yeah, it
So if
solves the
you,
issue. Sorry.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it solves this issue about just having a README and follow a ton of steps. So instead,
Yeah.
you just need Docker install, and then Maven test, and it will run for your test, and Maven Spring Boot test run.
Yeah. So if you're someone like me who finds themselves like defining all of these containers in a Docker Compose and then kind of duplicating them on the test side, we can alleviate defining these containers multiple times, just use them once from like the test container side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nobody wants
you
to do the work
don't want to
twice.
configure twice. Yeah,
Nobody
I
wants
don't.
that.
No.
Yeah.
Cool. So something else that you may have heard of over the last couple of years, this AI thing has been happening. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I think
But
I heard of it. Yeah, recently.
people are talking. And yeah, so Spring AI has been a big project on the Spring side. And one of the things, all these really big companies are building all these really big models, these proprietary models. And even though there are company names like OpenAI, they have no open models as of right now. And there's sometimes that like maybe you don't want to run a model like OpenAI or Anthropic's Claude on your local machine. Maybe you want to talk to one of these open source models out there. So in the past, DaShaun and I have talked about things like Ollama that allows you to run a local model. But recently, Docker announced something new, Docker Model Runner. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, indeed. I think it was 1 month ago, and today we had a new version of it. So
Oh, nice.
yes,
Upgrade all the things. Upgrade all the things. If you're listening to this, upgrade all the things.
exactly. It's what I just did before joining the call. So yeah, last month Docker Desktop 4.40 was released with support for it. It brings a new feature, which is the Docker Model Runner. The Docker Model Runners allow you to run the models locally, right? And this feature, it was available only for Mac OS Apple Silicon with Apple Silicon chips. The latest version that it was released today, it supports also x86 Windows with NVIDIA GPUs. So if you
Nice.
are on Windows, you can just start using it.
That's
nice.
awesome.
I happen to have one of those over here.
And what I really like, DaShaun brings bro a quote that I mentioned last year at DevOps UK, which was imagine Docker but for LLMs. That's Ollama, right? At that time. And now at that time, yes. But if we look at Docker, Docker has already the whole ecosystem, like okay, a registry that currently it was working only for images, and the Docker desktop, the engine, and all of that. So now Docker Desktop provides an inference engine in order to run those models. It has the Docker registry in which it will host the models as well in a OCI format. That's another interesting part of it.
Yeah.
And it has integration with Compose and Testcontainers now. So if you want to run those models locally because of privacy, security, give a try to the Docker.
So we don't have to imagine anymore. Like imagine LLMs on Docker. Like, oh, that's what we have. This is where we're at.
We need to update it.
Let's do it again. Let's do the talk. This is very, very cool. But you just said it's integrated. Docker being integrated with Docker Compose, so I can do these things. And I talk about it a lot. Like I definitely say, I don't like training somebody else's models. I like models that I can run locally, where I know where the traffic's going. Because I might ask some crazy stuff, and I don't want to train somebody else's model. And I like to keep my stuff here, so I'll run things on Raspberry Pis. Can I do that? Can I run these now on Raspberry Pis? There's a question about running it on Linux. Can I do it?
I am not sure if you can install Docker Desktop on Raspberry Pis. I think no. Not sure about that.
Maybe. That sounds like something I could do offline.
Yeah, but that's Linux right now. Yeah, right? That's Linux. You can't right now, but maybe in the future it will be available.
Okay. All right, because there's Windows for ARM that I can run on a Raspberry Pi. But maybe we're crossing the streams there. We'll look. And when we figure it out, we'll come back.
Yeah, this is still a beta feature, the Docker Model Runner, and we are, the team is receiving a lot of feedback about it. Something that I forgot to mention is that the Docker Model Runner provides a compatible OpenAI API. So, and that's how it integrates very well with the Spring AI project.
Yep, I was going to mention that. So I did a video on this, I think last week or 2 weeks ago. And so right out of the box with Docker Model Runner, you can go ahead and pull open source models. So my example was Gemma 3. You can pull Gemma 3 down and immediately from the terminal, start interacting with it, ask it questions, get responses. Great. But there is and if you go through the Docker Model Runner documentation, it clearly lays this out for you. But if you go in and kind of check this feature and say enable TCP integration, it'll basically open something up. And now it provides an endpoint. And so all you need is that endpoint. Now I can go into Spring AI, create a new Spring AI with OpenAI as kind of the large language model. And then you don't need to enter an API key because you're talking to a local model. And then you put in that URL that Docker gives you. And that's basically your base path for the endpoint. And so now you are running an OpenAI compatible AI application using Spring, except you're talking to that local model. And again, as you said, a lot of pros to that. Security being one of them. You're not kind of training a model. Any of your private documentation that you want to kind of test out locally in a sandbox, you can do that without handing that over to somebody else. Costs. You're not paying for this now. If you don't want to pay for that, everything's kind of free on your local machine. And speed, at least for me on my machine, I got a good machine. It's really, really fast. I don't have that network latency that I got to deal with. So a lot of pros here if you want to give that a test.
I think I'm starting to rub off on Dan because he mentioned cost. Like the idea early in my career, $20,000 for that sounds reasonable, right? I already mentioned that it seemed reasonable for what we were trying to do. It seemed to make a lot of sense. But now I think more than ever before, as a software developer, we've got to consider these things. Maybe not as a junior developer. Somebody else is probably making those decisions. But there's some point in your career where you've got to start thinking about what impact this is going to have. If Nate Shudo was here, I would kick it off to him to quote something wonderful about being around long enough to see the outcomes of the decisions that we make. And cost is one of those things. If we can do things more affordably, I think our career's got a better path. And now with AI and how it's going, not everybody has cloud money. I don't have cloud money. I have Raspberry Pi money, so I want to run these things locally. And this all plays really nicely for what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and I struggle with that because as a developer, even if I'm using something like OpenAI, on my local machine, I'm not really paying much for that. This isn't taking high throughput. This is just kind of MVPing something out. but I do get it. Even like 20 years ago, $10 would have been a lot to me to like have to pay to like whip something up. So I'm very cognizant of that.
You have $10 just laying around? Like, what? This guy's throwing around money.
But yeah, I think the speed is like being able to just kind of MVP something on my local machine, not especially if I'm inside of an organization. I don't want to be handing over proprietary code or proprietary documents to these large language models, so that I can go back to my boss and say, hey, I threw this MVP together on my local machine, didn't share this data with like OpenAI or anybody.
Yeah.
Look at this thing. What do you think? And then that could be a jumping point to, okay, I like that MVP. Maybe we move to like one of these large language models, in another environment. So
the other thing that still, it's a far cry from leaving the Hadoop server on over the weekend that cost us a boatload of money. But I've already started hearing stories of teams that were leaving demo project and running through 20 million tokens in a weekend, which is a few $100s, it's not tens of thousands of dollars or more.
Yeah.
But still, we have to be careful. We have to be careful about these things that we do. And yeah, the risk, right, of me leaving something on over the weekend is far less when I'm doing it here in my home lab against my own hardware. The risk of just the cost, that risk is lower, but also the risk of training somebody else's models with my personal or proprietary data. This is a big thing. So yeah, there's a risk consideration there as well.
Cool. Got a comment here. DaShaun and his Raspberry Pis inseparable as night and day.
Yeah, I mean, that's just part of it. I don't have cloud money, so this is wonderful.
I put this up earlier, but I'm going to share the link out in the show notes later. You had a really great article on the Spring AI blog on getting started with Spring AI and Docker Model Runner. And I think we talked about this before the show, but in this article, you had an example of using test containers and using a SOCAT container. Can you tell me what that is and like how that works? Because I don't think I've seen that before.
Yeah, I really like Testcontainer because of that. It allowed you to do a lot of crazy things. And indeed, the Docker LLM runner, when you enable it in a Docker desktop, it's not available outside in the same host network. So you need to enable the other option, which is the TCP port on host, right? And you will access to it. But that's disabled for security reasons. So we were looking at it and decided to use the socket container implemented in Testcontainers already. And basically enable a utility container which will proxy the Docker model runner that is running inside Docker desktop. And then your tests that are already using Testcontainers then can use the Docker model runner without exposing the TCP host port.
Cool.
This whole thing circles back for me. The TCP port enabling doing effectively connected to a different Docker host over a different way. In Spring Boot 3.4, we added by default the build pack that you get when you do MVNW Spring Boot build image. It uses a multi-architecture build pack that can deliver ARM64 images or x86 AMD64 images. And with that, everything changed, right? That we have this supported multi-architecture approach. And a lot of the community was like eager, and this is great. And how do I test it? And what about, do I have to build everything on this Raspberry Pi, or can I do it a different way? And I really got pulled into connecting to a remote Docker desktop, a remote Docker host. So I could have one Docker host that's running ARM64. I could have another Docker host that's running AMD64 if I wanted. I could always use emulation and cross the streams, and that works great as well. But what now it's top of mind, and now I see it more and more. There are a lot of organizations, teams that are using Docker as their infrastructure Like it's
Yes.
Docker running on a M4, MX large or whatever, and they're deploying with a Docker Compose. I see that more and more. And I used to think like, oh, they would never take Docker to production, but they are, right? Kubernetes is everywhere, but the truth is Docker is what's everywhere. Like most of my Kubernetes clusters are running inside of Docker. So this whole thing, you bring up the TCP and the socket connection, and it's opened the door. There are a lot of organizations that are running out, and it's working out great. It's working out just fine. They're running in production, they're building business on top of it, and that's fantastic. Sometimes there's a lot of joy that can be found in the simplicity of these things that are available on our local machines, and we can do amazing things with them. Sometimes that simplicity of, oh, I can do that already with what I've got sitting at my keyboard. I don't have to go out and stand up new infrastructure to try out these crazy new things. I don't have to stand up Kubernetes in order to do really cool AI workloads and use cases. I have it all right here in my Docker desktop.
I was also surprised when I hear that people is using Docker as a deployment mode in production or sharing environments with that. But yeah, it is what it is.
It's so flexible, right? Just like you were saying with Testcontainers, it is so flexible. You can do a lot of things. Sometimes you don't need more, right? And it's about making the right decision for the circumstance, because we don't all work at Fortune 2000 companies. We don't all work at Global 2000 companies that need 8 different regions, right? Docker Compose has this nice, like, on failure, restart always. Bring it back up.
One thing I wanted to point out from that article too that I thought was important, if you want to get into using Docker Model Runner, is that it supports tool calling, which is important. So a lot of these large language models, we have limitations with them. They don't have access to real-time data or real-time events. So you can kind of augment them by adding tool support. So I want to give it a tool to look up the current weather as the classic example. If the model that you pull down, like a Gemma 3, if it supports tool calling, you can use that right within Docker Model Runner, or in the Spring AI app, the example that you built in this article, talking to a Gemma 3 on Docker Model Runner, this supports that. So I think that's a big feature. If the model that you're using supports it, then you can take advantage of it. So that was really cool to see.
I have a question. How do we see, in the models that are available, how do we see which ones support tool calling?
Good question.
Usually,
I was surprised when I looked at the models. I was surprised at which model is the most downloaded. The Docker Hub gives us a great, like, you can see how many stars, how many downloads, and you can see like how many downloads in the last week. I was surprised, and I'm still surprised, that the DeepSeek R1 Distill Llama is the most downloaded model.
Oh, are you in the Docker registry? I can share a link.
Yeah, I am.
Because there is a tool calling in the characteristics of section. For example, I am looking at the AI Gemma 3.
Okay.
Internal. Okay. I share it internally in the chat, so you can look at it. Yeah.
Okay.
But indeed, there is a check if it supports tool calling.
Wonderful. I will put that into the chat so everybody can see it. Yeah, so there's a characteristics section on each of the models that are available. And all those models are available at hub.docker.com/r/AI. I should put that link there as well.
Here's a good question. When you're evaluating these local models, so we have Docker Model Runner, we can pull a particular model down, run it on our machine. I'm very fortunate that I have a very good machine. I have an M4 with like lots of RAM, lots of GPUs. They integrated GPUs, right? Like, it's a pretty powerful machine. I always just grab like the smallest one because I don't want to take up 20 gigs of space on my machine. Like the Gemma 3 one, I think was like 7 gigs or something. I think 7 gigs. And this works great. But then I get a lot of questions on my videos like, can I run that on my machine? I'm like, I don't know. You could try and see how it goes, but how do you kind of evaluate like what model do I run on my machine? Because
I think
machine's different.
Yes, and I think indeed I was having this issue because I haven't upgraded my machine in years, And then the last week, when I was writing this article, I was running out of space because of the models. So I was looking for a small one, which I think Gemma is around 7 gigas, maybe. Uh, but yeah, currently, I don't think there is a check in order to verify that.
Right.
But
DaShaun, is space just an issue for you, or like from a performance standpoint, like how do you kind of evaluate these?
Right. It depends. So I'll start by saying, with most of the audience that I have, outside of this, most of our customers that are using Spring AI, that are dabbling in AI, they're using more than one model. Right. The laptop that I travel with, I've got typically 7 to 10 different models that are there available, and I just kind of rotate between. I'll choose them all. I'm running Olama
But not
right now
everybody
on
has the space for that.
Not every, but so I've got this little cluster here. I'm going to unplug it real quick. This little cluster here is 2 Raspberry Pi 4s. That's why I asked about Raspberry Pi and doing this, because that would be the next step, because I can run Olama on here and I can run different models. The performance isn't great, but it's very affordable, right? And the demo that I give, since the milestone 1 about checking if my kid's room is clean, I can run Lava on here. This model is going to work. It takes about 30 seconds to get that response back, to analyze that image, but it's you can get this type of compute for $15.
Yeah.
For $50, right? You can have this little model runner, and this is just an option. This is my similar. I have 104 different Raspberry Pis that are running, but you can buy the Jetson Nano. You can buy these machines to just run your models. And I know I'm not trying to minimize. It's $150, but for $150, you can run models and you can get decent response times. So there are models that can run locally, even on commodity hardware like a Raspberry Pi. If you can trade off some of the performance, right? If you don't need sub-second GPU performance, but you still want to explore AI and all of the cool things that it can do, especially right now in this massive wave that we're a part of, like, get on board.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, and on my local machine, like that Gemma 3 runs extremely fast. So I don't know what that compares to like on like an x86 laptop that's 4 years old, but for anybody who asks that, I would just try it out. If you have the space, download it and see how it runs. One of my dreams is to like pick up one of these, like those NVIDIA machines they're talking about, the DGX Spark or whatever, which was that digits one we talked about a while ago. That's kind of the next step, is like getting these like beefy machines in my office and being able to download like these huge open models and put them on my local network. That would be a lot of fun to do. So
yeah, indeed, it's a good excuse to get a new one, right?
They what?
It's a
Get
good
a new one.
excuse to get a new one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to twist my arm. I like I said, I recently went out and bought a 5090, and I used the excuse, well, my son wants to play Fortnite on it. But yeah, I've got a nice little, I got the nice things. But it's all here, right? I paid for it once. I'm only going to cry once, and I get to use it. So yeah, it's a good time. It's a great time to be a Spring developer.
Yeah. Speaking of Spring AI, you put together this article. You went through and like showed off an example of how to use a model on Docker Model Runner. What has been your experience with Spring AI so far, and how are you liking it?
Well, as you may guess, I really love the Spring way of doing things. So it was pretty easy. At the beginning, I remember I had some issues understanding the whole thing about AI, but in the team, well, they helped me to understand a few things, and I was able to build something, a really small application using Spring AI and Testcontainers. So it's pretty cool indeed. For the article, I used the function calling, and it was so easy to do. So
it's I mean, it's been AI. The landscape of AI has changed so much over the last like year or two that the API in Spring AI has kind of changed, but now it's gotten to a point where it's pretty stable ahead of GA next month. And yeah, I think from where it started to where it is now, everything's really easy to get started with. And I was listening to a podcast with Josh on the Beautiful podcast talking about this, and Spring has always been really great at this. Like it started out as like, here's a component model and whatever domain it goes into, whether it's data with Spring Data or integration or now AI, it's all about just learning that new domain. But the programming model of Spring kind of stays the same. So you can probably pick it up pretty quickly if you're already in the Spring world, which is really great. And I've even got Java developers who are not in the Spring world into the Spring world because of something like Spring AI. So that's been a lot of fun.
I can double down on that one. The path to AI does not have to go through Python. Even for Python developers, Spring AI's abstraction and the abstraction layer across these LLMs and SLMs, even for a Python developer, it's an easy onboarding process, and the results are great.
I think Java developers are lucky. Yeah, I feel really lucky because we have a great ecosystem, really good tools, build tools, a great framework, great testing frameworks as well, a testing library. So it's really nice. I really like to play with all these libraries like Awaitility, Testcontainers, of course, Rest Assured, along with the Spring. Yeah, I have built indeed all my examples using Testcontainers are built using Spring, so I can test early all the features that are coming in the next version, and always testing against milestones.
Yeah. And that's why whenever I hear some Rust developer who's been doing this for a year proclaim Java dead, I'm like, you just don't know what you're talking about. This industry is like, this community is so large at this point and so invested in Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies. I think there's like 95% of the top Fortune 500 companies are using Java in some form. And it's just, as you said, the ecosystem is so great. It is not stagnant. There are so many tools and libraries and frameworks for just getting things done. So I am also very fortunate to be part of this community.
I want to circle back. I put a star on this question from Daniel. He's asking, is SoCat similar to WireGuard? Like what is it working like under the covers?
I'm not sure about WireGuard.
Okay. I think what I understood was it's creating a proxy.
Oh, okay.
So maybe not similar to WireGuard.
Yeah, I think it's not similar. Yeah, for what I read just quickly.
But yeah, good questions. Get your questions asked, right? That's one thing we like to say.
We were kind of chatting before we hopped on the air here, and anything exciting you within the world of Docker or test containers? Any kind of new features that are standing out to you that you'd kind of like to share?
Yes, sure, indeed. Well, maybe I can share my screen for a minute.
Yeah, that'd be great. And again, we have a few minutes here, so if you got a chance to, if you have not had a chance to get a question in, get them in now. We'll see if we can't get them answered.
When you come to my house for dinner, if you leave hungry, that's your fault. When you come to Spring office hours, if you've got questions and you don't ask them, that's your fault. Don't leave hungry.
Okay. So last week there were a couple of releases. One for test containers. Test containers Java and Go offers now a Docker model runner, so you don't need to know about the socket container. It simplifies everything to just one line of code.
Oh wow, so that's awesome.
You have the Docker model running container. You will specify the image as always, and then you just play with it. So I have an example. I am just updating the repository that is shared on the blog post. And you just need this, like define the bean, the Docker model runner container bean, then use the dynamic property registrar, set the DMR get OpenAI endpoint, of course, set the key, the model you want to use, and that's it.
So I would do this if I wanted to run some kind of evaluations against my model, like, hey, is this a really good one is like things that you know are going to be deterministic, right? Like if I wanted to run some like sentiment analysis, like if I gave it these 10 pieces of feedback, are they saying that this is like a positive or a negative? So in that case, you can set up that test, provide a bunch of like test cases for it, and then have it actually feed those to the model and see if that is exactly what's coming back, correct?
Yes, indeed. I think we shared this last year because the Spring AI project introduced the relevancy evaluator, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then later I helped the team introducing the bug evaluator, which use the bespoke mini-check model. So all the documents that have been used in order to provide that answer will evaluate using
Nice.
that new model. And it will respond, yes, it complains, or it doesn't. So that's very, very cool to do it.
Cool.
And another feature that I will, it was recently released, is
Ooh.
Docker Compose. So in Docker Compose, there is a new type, and indeed that's the reason why it's red right here, because it's new for IntelliJ as well. It's this provider, which in this case the type is model, and then you will define the model that you are going to use, the AI geometry in my case, and then you can just start the Docker Compose app, and then it will some environment variables will be available in order to you to use to point to this service.
So
And
if I wrote an application in Spring AI that used Gemma 3 from Docker Model Runner, and then I handed this project over to DaShaun, he doesn't need to pre-configure his environment. As long as he's got Docker Model Runner, we run the Spring application. This will kind of kick this service up. The first start will probably take a couple minutes, because it's got to pull that down. But again, that one step that you don't need to put in a README going, make sure you download this first, then run the application.
What I do not remember is if the model will be pulled.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe that's a prerequisite
Gotcha.
to run the
Okay.
Docker Compose full.
Yes,
Yeah.
Docker model pull.
Yep.
The model, and that's it.
Cool.
That's good. That is, yeah, I think that answers the question. Hey, is there support for test containers for Spring AI? Like, yeah, this is what we're showing you. There, you have all the tools, the integration, the ecosystem. It's massive, and it keeps on getting better. And you also have an easy way to onboard. This is great.
Yes.
That feature is great. My mind is racing. So, again, like I mentioned, we have a lot of customers, a lot of teams. They're not leaning into one model. Some models are better than some things at others. And instead of saying, "Oh, we're just going to use this one model to do all the things," you grab the right model off the shelf, right? You grab the right tool for the job, and you can put all of them in there. So I'm assuming I can run multiple models given that same Docker Compose. So yeah.
Yes. So now with this support in Docker Compose and Test Container, you are not only sharing the definition of the service that you want to test, but also the definition of the models for the AI project. So that's very cool.
That's great.
There's a good question here that I want to dig into, because it's a really, really unique use case, and it's one that I like. The question here is, I have two microservices called microservice A, microservice B. Microservice A uses microservice B. Can I spin up microservice B as a test container?
Sure. As far as there is a Docker image for it, then you can just spin it up. The downside, well, we don't advocate for that very often, and we understand some need it for reasons, right? It depends on the context, but we don't advocate about it, because in this case, the microservice B depends on other services, maybe a database, maybe Kafka, I don't know. So if you spin up everything, like it could be really heavy for your machine. If you have one of the powerful machines, so just go for it.
Yeah, this is where I lean into, and it's test container too. But we talked about native images and how I like to use test containers to generate my native images. One of the things that maybe you're leaning into this, Akanda, is I like to have native images. One of the things that I preach and I promote is, whether you're using the native images in production or not, there's a ton of value to generating the native images so that you can use them locally. You can use them in local development. So even though in production you might have 4 gig container images, locally you might have 40 meg, 100 meg, 200 meg container images, and they can scale to 0. If they're built with native images, for them to scale to 0 and stand up locally, like, you'll get the benefits. And you can have hundreds of images running locally, running air quotes, but scaling up and scaling down as you need them.
My kind of go-to in the past with that has always been like, let me, I don't want to use an actual microservice B in my development environment. If I'm talking to service B, I'm using something like Spring Cloud Contract to define the contract. That way, everything I'm doing is local, it's fast. And then when we get into like an integration testing scenario, now we'll bring the real service B in to kind of test against it. So yeah, find the least resistance path to be able to do what you need to do on your local machine, and then worry about connecting all those other services later.
Yes.
Yeah, I've also seen, just as a test this, you talked about Spring Cloud Contract. I have seen teams using a test container for microservice B that just implements some contract, some default set of tests that they can stand up and they can use as a test container to validate. Yeah, it's neat. I like where your head's at.
Well, we are running out of time here, so I think we'll kind of wrap things up. But Edu, can you kind of let everybody know where they might be able to find you if you want to be found? If you don't want to be found, that's okay as well.
Well, I think I am on all social networks as Edu Melendez all together. So yeah, GitHub, Twitter, X, Blue Sky. Yeah.
All the fun places. Cool. Well, I'll do a good job of trying to collect those up and put those in the show notes, as well as a link to that wonderful article you wrote on the Spring blog. Thank you for that. And we'll have to keep in touch and find out what's happening in the world of test containers and Docker. And when you have some new things you want to talk about, just let us know and we'll make sure we get them out there and hopefully have you back again.
Yes, hopefully we'll have you back again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Fantastic.
All right. With that, I think we'll end today's show. We have some exciting things on the schedule, and as soon as we can get them scheduled, we will. But again, May is coming. May, Spring Boot 3.5, Spring AI 1.0, a bunch of really great conferences. Oh, I guess I'll end there. Where will we see you next? Where are you going to be at?
Well, I think I will be local here in Mexico, in Guadalajara,
Right.
maybe giving a talk. And
Nice.
maybe in Dominican Republic as well.
Awesome.
So hopefully I will be in Spring IO. I'm not sure yet.
That would be great. All right. Well, if you're there, I'll make sure to come say hi. Again,
Yes.
Thank you for everything. We appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.